I think of the voice user interface, our ability to interact with machines using voice, is similar to where we were 20 years ago with search engine optimization. Certain people are going to recognize very quickly that the voice user interface is a game changer.
Hi, I'm James Taylor, business creativity and innovation keynote speaker, and this is The Creative Life, a show dedicated to you, the creative. If you're looking for motivation, inspiration, and advice while at home, at work, or on your daily commute, then this show is for you. Each episode brings you a successful creative, whether that's an author, musician, entrepreneur, performer, designer, or thought leader. They'll share with you their journey, their successes, their failures, their creative process, and much, much more. You'll find show notes for this episode, as well as free training on creativity, over at jamestaylor.me. Enjoy this episode. Hey there, it's James Taylor, and I'm delighted today to have on the show William Ammerman. William Ammerman is Executive Vice President of Digital Media at Engage Media Inc. and has previously held leadership positions with Tribune Media, Hearst Television, and Capital Broadcasting. Over his career, he has managed digital advertising for hundreds of television stations and their websites, mobile apps, and connected platforms. His latest book is called The Invisible Brand: Marketing in the Age of Automation, Big Data, and Machine Learning. And it delves into the future of marketing in this age of AI. It's my great pleasure to have William with us today. So welcome, William.
It's nice to be with you.
So share with us all what's happening in your world just now.
Well, we kicked the book off in June, and I've been really excited about the response. It's been interesting to see how timely this is. And there's a lot of people that are very, very eager to understand how artificial intelligence is changing marketing. But more so, people are starting to recognize that artificial intelligence is already changing them. And I think that's been perhaps the most gratifying aspect of writing the book, is just helping people see that this is already at work in their lives.
So essentially, this book is coming out with it's come out with McGraw-Hill, traditional, very well-known traditional publisher, especially in the education space as well. And I often wonder, going on a topic that is as fast-moving as this. Normally, these books you have to kind of give them to the publishers like a year in advance. How does that work when you're writing about an area that's changing so quickly, but the lead times of traditional publishing is so long?
Yeah, I was very fortunate that I was able to squeeze in a few last bit tidbits. One was a quote by Tim Berners-Lee, and he said, and I quoted him in one of my later chapters, he said, if you put a drop of love into Twitter, it seems to decay, but if you put in a drop of hatred, it seems to propagate more strongly. And I found that to be a very prescient comment, and one that tied in neatly with a major theme of my last chapter. And he said it right before I had to actually put the final final strokes on the signature for the book, dot the T's or dot the I's and cross the T's. And he said that, and I was like, wait, I got to squeeze this in. So yeah, I was kind of haunted by the pressure of getting to the deadline, because I felt like every day there was something new coming out, and subsequently there have been a lot of things that I've wished I could have included in the book. So it is challenging, particularly in something that is fast moving. But I think it's very packed with relevant and timely information. And I think for the average reader who's looking at the book for basic information about how the technology works, how it's impacting their lives, and what the future holds, I think all of that stuff will remain intact and quite timely. And over time, I hope that it holds up well.
So take us back in terms of your history. Obviously today, you're very involved in terms of future marketing and AI and machine learning and big data. But where did you get started in this industry?
So I've been doing digital media longer than anyone who isn't a billionaire. And that's not necessarily a good thing, but it's true. I've been doing this for decades. And I was managing digital advertising for Tribune. I've managed digital advertising for Hearst Television, for big nationwide publishers, big TV groups that have 30, 40 TV stations. So worrying about kind of the technology had been kind of second nature to me. This is just what I do, is figure out what's coming and what's next. And along the way, I discovered that a lot of people were very interested in understanding exactly what's happening to me as a result of this technology. How are you influencing me, and how does this all work? And I found a very willing audience of friends and acquaintances and even academics who really wanted to understand, okay, we're in this era of programmatic advertising where we are able to deliver ads through programmatic auctions, through real-time bidding, so that I can deliver a different message to one person than another in near instantaneous form. As everyone that I talked to agreed, it's kind of strange and eerie that computers can speak to you differently than the next person based on your history and what you've done and what you've explored on the internet. And so this notion of kind of personalized information was a foundational concept for me, that I tried to help people understand that your Facebook feed is different than my Facebook feed, and that persuasion as a science is allowing us to deliver persuasive messaging that is different for you than for me. And then when we couple that with machine learning, you're now dealing with machines that can learn to persuade you using information that has been personalized just for you. And that's really new territory. And then now we're in the age where we're now talking to our machines, we're talking to our phones, we're talking to our TVs, we're talking to our cars, and we're asking some fairly basic questions. Today we're asking, where's the nearest Thai restaurant, or what's a good scary movie to watch? But soon we're going to be asking more sophisticated questions. We're going to be asking, what kind of car should I buy, or what should I study in college, or even who should I marry? And at the point where we're asking those kinds of questions, we have to remind ourselves that the voice that's answering us back has an objective. It has a desire, if you will, to persuade us. And that those voices that are answering us back are coming through technology that is designed to learn how to persuade us using personalized information. So we're having a conversation with machines that are there to persuade us. And I want people to not only be aware of that, but to be prepared for the opportunities that creates, as well as the risks, so that we can all benefit positively with it while mitigating the negative consequences. And that's why I wrote the book. I wanted to help people understand, when you're talking to a machine in the very near future, you have to see through the device. You have to see through the technology to that invisible force on the other end that wants to persuade you. And so I named the book The Invisible Brand, because I wanted to point out that there are these kind of hidden forces operating through technology to change who we are and how we think and what we do.
It's interesting. I mean, this morning, I'm not filming today from my studio in the UK. I'm in Park Avenue, staying in a hotel on Park Avenue here in New York City. And this morning I woke up and I almost instantaneously said, "Hey Siri, what's and in fact it's not Siri. Hey Alexa, I suddenly forgot I was in a dumb hotel room, and it kind of that's right, I'm not in my usual place, and at home I've got all these things which I've got little triggers that set up, and certain things happen, and it recognizes my daily kind of how I can tend to start my day. And I think about that, and I think about, well, it's so easy for brands to bring themselves into that part of my morning routine, that morning conversation. Like the toothpaste companies, you tend to kind of go with certain brands of toothpaste because they're just the way it's your morning routine. So you mentioned this word influence or persuasion a lot. And I'm interested here around, you think about works like persuasion, influence, people like Robert Cialdini, for example, in his book Influence, he talks about the psychology of persuasion and influence. How much of that, that traditional type of psychology, persuasion, influence that we initially maybe assumed with old style marketing and sales, how much have you seen that actually being kind of like programmed into the AIs? Or is the machine, because it's using machine learning, so it's not doing things necessarily from rules, is it kind of looking at that and it's recognizing that anyway, so it's just kind of going further and further down that path of knowing what presses are hot buttons?
You're very knowledgeable to be able to ask that question the way you did. And the answer is it's both. I'll give you the answer from kind of the traditional psychology and how it's being applied first, and then second to how machine learning is changing the rules. So the first answer is, yeah, we're looking at the ocean personality traits, OCEAN, and we're able to actually score people based on their openness or their reaction to images and pictures, and we can give people openly, knowing that they're taking an ocean test. We can give people an ocean test, and then we can deliver messaging back to them in a way that will be most appealing for their personality type. So that is an application of a more what we would think of as kind of a traditional psychological approach. You identify someone's personality type, and then you deliver messaging in a way that you think would appeal to that particular personality. The second part of your question, which is spot on, is the idea that we can throw out all of the psychology rules and we can just let the computer figure it out. And I say that a little flippantly, but there's some truth to what I just said, and I can kind of illustrate that. So when we think about discovering paths and trends and trend lines in data, oftentimes we're thinking about kind of predicting the future based on kind of a statistical analysis. So, we're going to plot a bunch of points and we're going to try to find a trend line, and we're going to try to predict that the future is going to be within, a certain range of this trend line. But we've now reached a point where we're no longer just predicting, but we're prescribing the future. We're actually trying to change the outcomes. We're trying to bend people's behaviors towards a certain KPI, as an example. And I think that we are now in a new era of marketing where we can actually gather a lot of information from lots of different sources. So we can test a message a million different ways. We can combine words differently for different people. We can combine those words with different images in a massive focus group. In traditional marketing, we might have 6 people around a table in a focus group. Today, Google is the world's largest focus group, right? We have, literally billions of subjects that we can test messaging with, and that allows the computer to kind of look at the data and discover patterns in the data that a human being might not recognize, and then work with that data discovery to develop new tactics that a human being might not apply, and to deliver those tactics at a very micro level. It might be that one tactic gets applied one time to one person rather than kind of broadcast messaging where a radio tower sends the same message to everybody at the same time. We're now in an age where a single persuasive message might be better for you, and a different version of that might be more effective for someone else. And we can, easily see that a single, very highly customized, very personalized message that's delivered just to you might be the real answer. So we've gone from kind of mass communications and mass broadcasting to what I think of as mass customization. And this notion that we can deliver mass customized messaging in real time to individuals through conversation, I think is a real game changer that people need to understand.
So as you're talking about that, I'm thinking, for example, with our team, it used to be, we'd say Google ads. We're running Google ads or YouTube ads, and we would have to say, okay, we want to target these types of people. This is their demographic. This is where they live, all that stuff. And now we don't do really any of that. We just basically say, here's 1,000 of our previous customers. Go and find me 1 million people like that. But my sister and I were talking about this the other day. Is that we don't quite know how it's doing it. We don't know all we know is we've seen the conversion rates, which are amazing, which are fantastic, but we're not quite sure what's going on. So how does this change then the role of the marketer? We think about the marketer being that, that often that the creative type that's writing the copy and doing that kind of thing. If the machine is better understanding our customers than we are as the individuals, as the humans in the game, how does that change what the roles of the marketer is going to be?
I get asked this question a lot, and I answer it by saying that 20 years ago, the marketer had to learn a whole new technology, and that was search. Google comes out, you've got search, and now the idea is to optimize your campaign. So you create this new discipline within marketing of search engine optimization. And some people caught on quickly. They said, this is a game changer. I need to invest in this. I need to learn this. I need to do this. And other people kind of ignored it and kept doing what they were doing. And of course, they lost, and the people that got on board won. I think we're at the same juncture today where I think of the voice user interface, our ability to interact with machines using voice is similar to where we were 20 years ago with search engine optimization. Certain people are going to recognize very quickly that the voice user interface is a game changer, that human beings are going to naturally want to interact with their machines to say, like your example, I've got 1,000 users and I want to build a lookalike audience of 1 million people who share signals in common with these 1,000 people so that I can deliver my messaging. Wouldn't it be nice if you just simply could say that to your computer and have the computer run off and do it? Go find me 1 million people that look like these 1,000. Well, that kind of technology is emerging. And for people who embrace it, they're going to benefit. For people who don't, they're like the ones who ignored search engine optimization 20 years ago. They're going to get left behind. And so I don't think of it so much as changing the role of the marketer so much as I think of it as changing the marketer's toolkit. The marketer still has to do basic marketing things, but they've got a new set of tools available to them. And this is perhaps the most powerful tool that's ever been created, is this new ability to interact and to interface with the computer. Now that works for the marketer's benefit, but it also helps the consumer. It makes my life a lot easier if I could just tell my car, take me to Target, take me to, this destination. That's an ease of use that makes my life easier. And of course, we're now talking to our machines, and we're asking for lots of things. And it's nice to be able to say, order The Invisible Brand by William Ammerman and have the book show up on your doorstep the next day. That kind of ease and simplicity is why consumers are going to continuously adopt these new techniques, and why marketers must be on top of voice commerce and the voice user interface.
And as I was in your book, you also talk about another area which I think is really interesting. And I was actually thinking about it from almost like a meta standpoint. You talk about natural language generation, where we see it now at the New York Times, I think, and some different publishers are actually using AIs to write some of the stories. And I was thinking, as these things were kind of coming together, like your book, for example, are we going to a place where maybe we don't need a writer like you? Maybe we're going to just say to AI, okay, this is the overall topic, write a book, and the book that I get is going to be different because it's going to go for my personality type. So let's say for me, I like lots of more story-based, where someone else might like more strong data. They want a lot of data there as well. So what are you starting to see in terms of that natural language generation, and how that you think could change the role of journalism and writing and marketing?
Well, first, you're right to say that it's already happening. So headlines are being written strictly by a machine. Body copy is being written by a machine. There's a company called Narrative Sciences, and Narrative Science, what they do is they actually can create copy directly from box scores from a baseball game, for example. They can create copy from stop quotes. So they can deliver information in kind of the form of human speech, written the way a journalist would write it. And the reason they can do that is there's a finite number of ways that a baseball game can end. Baseball games don't end in touchdowns, and they don't end in Academy Awards. So you can write down, balls and strikes and who the pitcher was and what the final score of the game was. And there's only so many adjectives available. It was incredible. It was long. It was boring. So whatever those adjectives are, you can string them together with the scores in a relatively finite number of ways that can actually generate, paragraphs that human beings can read. What's a little bigger stretch is to think that we'll be soon writing books or movies, but that's coming too. I remember the time when I was kind of new in the world of television, and I thought soon we will be able to produce feature-length movies that are fully animated. And of course, it wasn't long before Toy Story came out and proved that, yeah, you could, create, Pixar created movies that were feature-length animated movies. Well, I think that it's rational to believe that soon, sometime in the next decade, someone will produce, and I might have to qualify that by saying something may produce the first fully produced, artificially intelligent produced movie, where the script and all of the graphics, the animation, everything from beginning to end is entirely created by artificially intelligent agents working together to produce content. That sounds a little extreme and a little crazy, but I'll share what is known as GAN, which is a generative adversarial network, GAN. And I'll illustrate for you briefly how a GAN has been applied to creating paintings that human beings will buy at auction at Christie's. So if you think of two algorithms sitting side by side, and you have one algorithm that is explicitly designed to generate lots and lots of versions of paintings, create 1 billion different versions of images. The other, in the generative adversarial network, it's adversarial, they're working kind of against each other, if you will. The second algorithm is the judging algorithm. It judges which of these designs is most likely something that a human being would buy. So you have a generative algorithm and a judging algorithm, and they work side by side. That has proven very successful at creating music, at creating text, at creating paintings that human beings will purchase and are passable as if they had been created by a human being. In fact, Christie's auctioned one off a few months ago for $40,000. So somebody paid $40,000 for a painting that had been created by a GAN. When we take that and we extend it into the future, we can easily see that we can generate lots of versions of a news story, and then you can have a judging algorithm that says which one of these versions is most likely to be read. And it could be a different version for you and a different version for me. Which version of this would you most likely read versus which version of this will I most likely read? So it could be the exact same news content, but written with different words, different sentence structure that appeals to different people differently. So when we start to think about what a news article is today, we think of it as kind of this immutable thing, which is produced and it's published and it's set in stone. But in the future, we may be dealing with a news article which has 1 million permutations that are delivered to different people for different reasons. And that's really hard to get your head around initially until you kind of understand how the generative adversarial network can produce all of those versions and choose which ones to deliver to different people at different times. And of course, you can extend that out and say, oh, I can see that someday, as this gets more sophisticated, we'll be able to produce feature-length movies this way.
But you can see how as well, I mean, some of that is really just duplicating what currently exists, where someone might pick up this newspaper because it has a particular angle on the story. Another one picks up another one. The facts should be the same. They should be the same core facts, but they have a different view, a different perspective on it, I guess, as well. I mean, as you're talking about that, I see the thing I find most exciting about that is not so much the national, let's say in politics, the national politics stuff. We hear about Cambridge Analytica and how that's being influenced. And I actually see that as very interesting in terms of local politics and local journalism, where we think about, all these like town hall meetings, which are not really being reported at the moment, or things that are kind of going on there because it's expensive, to hire journalists to kind of go in and sit there in those meetings and in those town hall meetings and those committee meetings. But it's very simple now to do, because you can just have something recording the audio from the event, the video, and it's immediately kind of creating that content and creating that story.
And I agree that we're going to have a proliferation of access to information. The challenge, I think, for the consumer is sifting through this mountain of information and having something that will curate it for you and deliver the content that you're looking for. And in that curation is this opportunity not only for people to consume information that they like, but also to somehow trap themselves in kind of bubbles, echo chambers of their own making, where they have illustrated to the machine, I like to consume information about these topics. And then what they get echoing back to them is just more information on those topics without exposing them to a wider range of ideas. And I think that to some degree, to cycle back to Tim Berners-Lee's quote, I think that one of the challenges for us is to not put ourselves into partisan bubbles and to try to look beyond kind of the filters that we're applying to information. Because the danger, of course, is that you consume information that's in your filter, I consume information that's in my filter, and I look out at the world and I think, what on earth is wrong with these people that they don't think the way I think, that they don't know the information that I know, and what is this crazy stuff that they're talking about, which I've never heard of? Of course, that quickly gets us into this notion of these other crazy people. And as we all start to find ourselves thinking of, I'm sure in your own mind right now, without knowing anything about your politics, that you can picture some other group in your mind that comes clearly to mind that those people are crazy. I have no idea what's wrong with them. And I think we're all reaching this point where we're oversaturated with this notion of this vague notion of these crazy other people. Well, like in the United States, it's half the country. One half of the country thinks the other half of the country is completely bonkers, and the other half thinks the same. And so there's this kind of weird, partisanship that develops as we immerse ourselves with information that we like. And I oftentimes jokingly say we listen to the lies that we like, and I say that half jokingly, but in some cases, we really are immersing ourselves in information specifically because it's the news we like, not the news we need. And I think there's a real challenge there to help people kind of see outside of their bubble. Pop your own filter bubble and try to get outside and see some information that other people are consuming and try to understand where they're coming from in their filter bubble. Try to, literally put yourself inside their bubble.
I know people like Max Tegmark in a book Life 3.0, really great book about AI and where we could potentially be going with it. He actually talks about this idea where almost like the AI becomes a little bit of and we kind of pushing a little bit further in the future, like the benevolent dictator, where it said actually what is best for the community as a whole, or the country as a whole, or the world as a whole, is that we don't segment people up like that, and we give them a broader base, and almost like the AI is deciding what content to show you, not just based upon what your values and your needs are just now, but what it sees as a larger goal, which is going to create the most cohesion. And I think about countries like Singapore, for example. In Singapore, they, it's a very successful city-state, very financially successful. It's an incredibly diverse place. But one of the things that the government did there was never wanted to create ghettos of individual identity, individual communities. So in any building, they actually prescribe, okay, it has to have 30% who are Singapore Chinese, 30% that are Singapore Indian, 30% that are, whatever. So they actually talk about, they said, we make people crash together because it's only by doing that they get to understand each other. If we didn't do that, if everyone was kind of just left to their own devices, then you kind of get further into that. Now that's choosing a very a human authoritarian way of doing it. But I imagine that the AI, in terms of the outcomes, what the goals of the AI might decide to choose, it could almost kind of go that way as well.
Yeah, there have been a lot of experiments in social engineering over the decades. In communist, the USSR, they used to load entire ethnic groups and put them on trains and move them into other enclaves to try to create some kind of social cohesion. Of course, that created a lot of its own challenges and ghettoization of different social communities. But today, I think that, one of the most terrifying experiments that's happening is in China, where the government is actually creating a social credit system. And they are intent on creating ratings that rate people based on their social contribution. And you can imagine that, we can imagine both good and bad coming of this. Wouldn't it be great if, people that were, socially conscious and did wonderful things for society found some reward, whereas, in a capitalist society, we don't always reward people that are doing the right thing. It's hard to find a financial benefit to reward people for, recycling or turning off their, water faucets. There's little benefits, but it's been difficult for us to find those rewards. Well, under their system, they're saying, well, we're going to give you a ratings points for, good behavior, but they can also penalize you. So if you speak out against the government, of course, and you suddenly find that your ratings have dropped, that's kind of a terrifying prospect, that a government that's powerful enough to give you access to transportation and housing and food can suddenly take all of that away on the basis that, they don't like what you're saying online, or marching in Hong Kong as an example. So I think we have to be conscious that, the social engineering potential of artificial intelligence and the potentially benevolent dictator might not always be so benevolent, and that there are real concerns that I expressed in the book to be aware that this kind of notion of creating a currency out of your social credit can potentially be misused if a bad actor, and particularly a state actor, so chooses. And I think all of us need to be very conscious that not only is that a possibility, but in some ways it's already started, and it's all, the work on that has begun. And I think that being aware of that is the first step. And then we've got to figure out, what to do about it, and how we monitor it, and how we ensure that state actors don't use artificial intelligence for, not such good purposes. And we got to be real careful about that.
And it's fascinating, as someone who speaks in both the West and also in the East as well, and those different audiences, you definitely get a sense that there's almost like a splitting apart or a divide in terms of what the goals should be of the AI, for good or for bad. But there's definitely feels like very strongly about there's a Western view about what is possible with this. In Europe, actually, I would even say with Europe and America, is slightly different, because Europe has a slightly different view about data. About, we're very locked down in terms of Europe around data. America is much more open around data, and then China even more for data, because there's a different perception of that, and they're looking about creating harmonious societies, and they have different goals. So we're certainly living in an interesting time, and I think whether it's governments or whether it's marketers, thinking about the role of ethics, and what does the role of ethics have in some of these things we're doing, because some of these are still decisions that we, the humans, are making as to how we target certain groups or how we market certain groups.
I think from a purely business answer to that question, I would recommend for business owner out there, I think that being transparent and helping people understand what the trade-off is between the use of their data and the conveniences that they may get as a result is paramount. And, so as a simple example, I went away. It was Labor Day weekend here in the U.S. I put my dog at a kennel and went out of town. Now, the fellow at the kennel has a right and a need to know certain data about me. They need to know my telephone number, how I can be reached, where I'm going to be, how long I'm going to be gone, if there are any dietary needs for my dog, and if there is an emergency, am I leaving them with the ability to, seek emergency treatment, and is there a dollar value of, I'm willing to pay for, medical care for my dog up to $1,000, $5,000, $10,000. That kind of data is important for the kennel to know about me. And I transparently want the kennel to know that data about me, because I understand the direct relationship of the benefit to me. The benefit to me is if there's a problem, I can be reached, my dog can be treated, I come back and my dog is healthy and alive. That kind of trade-off, I think people are very willing, we're very willing to allow our data to be used for those purposes. If there's a clear benefit to me for giving you that data. I think where it crosses the creepy line is that we can't see the clear reason that you should have my data. We don't see the benefit, and we start to feel that you're spying on us, that you're using our data for benefits for yourself that aren't accruing back to me as the consumer. And so crossing that creepy line is an area where businesses, for their own good, need to be very careful, because I think consumers are increasingly active in punishing companies that cross that creepy line. And so I would encourage businesses to think about their own practices and make sure that, as a rule, that the benefit to the consumer is clear and that both sides understand the transaction of, why I need your data and what I'm planning to do with it. And that consumers are oftentimes more than happy to give up their data for the convenience, as long as they understand how you're using it and what the benefit is to them.
That's a fascinating observation. I really in that transparency piece as well. As we start to finish up here, William, I'd be fascinated to know if there was one book you were to recommend, not your own book, but a book. It could be around this area as well, or it could actually be on some of the other things that you've been touching on, which is around maybe the psychology piece, for example, or just a book you're reading just now. You think, actually, I think more people should be reading this book because it's interesting in terms of where the future. What would that book be?
So I'm afraid I read a lot of books, and the challenge of picking one, I will say, and this is way outside of the way you've asked the question, but I was influenced by Isaac Asimov as a young person, and psychohistory and the notion of psychohistorians was something that actually influenced me as I was thinking about my own book, and I was trying to come up with a word for technology that operates on us psychologically. And what do you call technology that changes you psychologically? You're talking to it, it's influencing you, it's learning to persuade you. It's psychological technology. Make a contraction out of that, it's psychotechnology, or you could shorten that even further to psychotech. And so a lot of what I've written about in the book is psychotechnology, how it's influencing our lives and what the potential is. So, without being confined to the world of business books, I might recommend, if you're a science fiction buff and you haven't read the Foundation, trilogy, that you might dig that out and read it. I think it holds up, to the test of time. And Asimov, certainly a brilliant writer and one that influenced me a lot.
And what about tools? If there's one tool that you'd recommend, maybe it's about your process, the way you think creatively about these areas, or because obviously you're dealing with so many tools and you're testing things all the time. What is one tool that you find very useful for doing the work you do?
Well, of course, I work a lot in advertising. So I work with data management platforms, DMPs. I work with companies that create data acquisition tools. And one that I'm using currently that's really interesting is a company called Reveal Mobile. And what they enable me to do is they enable me to go back in time, and they enable me to look at all of the mobile phone IDs that were present at a physical location during a date range. So imagine that, if I'm running, make up a crazy example on the fly here, I'm running a concrete construction company, and maybe there was the, international, this probably isn't a thing, but the International Concrete Mixers Convention in Las Vegas, and it was held back in March. Well, I can go back in time and I can put a geofence using Reveal Mobile's technology around the Las Vegas Convention Center for the week of March, 5th through 9th, or whatever the date range is. And I can capture a list of all of the mobile IDs that were physically in that bounded area. Now I've created a list of people who were probably attending the International Concrete Mixers convention, and those might be people who are my target audience if I'm in the concrete mixing business. So now take that and extend that to whatever industry you're in and think, what regions, what geographical boundaries, what events would I want to know that people had attended? What, if I knew that people were within this 2-block radius for 4 days back in March, what could I use that to do in terms of delivering ads? And then you import that data into a DSP, which is a demand side platform, and you use that to buy ads through real-time bidding and deliver ads to the people that were within that geo bound. Now, of course, artificial intelligence is going to make this better and better and better, but that's a tool set that I'm using currently that gives me a lot of insights into who people are, not just about where they go online, but where their phone goes in the real world. I like to say that the mobile device has become the window to the soul. I don't even need to know your name in order to deliver information that's targeted to you based on where your phone has gone in the real world and where your phone has gone online.
That's a fascinating tool. I'm definitely going to look into that. That's very interesting in terms of how that's doing that. And what about? I believe you're based in North Carolina.
I'm in Chapel Hill.
You're in Chapel Hill, and I know you've got some amazing musicians. A friend of mine, David Wilcox, great songwriter, who's very close to you. If you were to recommend one album, one piece of music that you're really into, you listen a lot to, what would that album be?
So I have to say that I was trying to kind of listen to my kids' music. I have 3 teenagers, college age actually, and they introduced me recently to a young woman named Billie Elish, and I can't tell you the name for her album, but I was actually pretty fascinated by her music recently, and I thought that it was even to my old ears, it was fun to listen to. So I know the young people are listening to that a lot, and I tried to continue to expose myself to a lot of new stuff and try to keep my ears open. That just happens to be something that I was listening to this past week with my college age kids.
I'm going to have you imagine that you wake up tomorrow morning and you have to start from scratch. So you've got all the skills, all the knowledge you've acquired over the years, but no one knows you, you know no one. What would you do? How would you restart things?
Boy, that's a tough one. I think that one of the things that I've learned about all of this technology and the way that people have been able to use it and make money with it is that a lot of it comes down to how a small business is operating and how a small business has to reach customers. And I've been influenced over the years by people like Gary Vaynerchuk, who have said, you've got to be living in this kind of thank you economy where you get to know your customer better and better and better. And he actually said in one of his speeches that I was present for, that his grandparents' generation would be better equipped to operate in the modern economy because they knew everybody in town. They knew everybody's birthdays. They knew who everybody was married to, how people were related. And we've now reached a point where we're transitioning from this kind of mass consumer economy to this mass customization where businesses have to know more and more about you. And so for me, if I was starting fresh, I would start a small business and I would look at my cash register really, really hard. And I would say, in this cash register, there is the data that drives the modern economy. And I've got to think about how to extricate from the cash register better data. I've got to look at my cash register data and I've got to segment it. Go back to the dog store. If I'm running a kennel or a pet store, I've got to know this is a customer who buys pet food. This is a customer who boards their pets. This is a customer who comes in for grooming. And if they come in for grooming, but they don't board their pet, I could say, hey, the next time you're going out of town, you can leave your dog with us and we will groom your dog while you're away. And when you come back, the grooming will be done and you've had a nice restful weekend. So I can start to see how the segmentation of my audience, the segmentation of my cash register influences my marketing messages. And I think if you look at things from the perspective of a small business owner struggling to understand what's in the cash register, you will start to see that that pattern repeats itself on larger and larger scales as you go up the chain to larger and enterprise level businesses. So I would, if it were me, I'd probably go run a pet store and see what I can do to apply AI technology to making a better, more efficient pet store. And from extension, I could grow my business and grow my understanding of this technology.
And finally, William, where is the best place for people to go to learn more about you, about the book, and other things that you've got going on just now?
Sure. My name, W for William, my first initial, and Ammerman, AMMERMAN.com is the fastest way. So whammerman.com. And if you want to order the book, The Invisible Brand, simply say, Alexa, buy The Invisible Brand by William Ammerman, and it'll arrive on your doorstep tomorrow morning.
Very nice, very nice. Well, William, thank you so much for coming on today, sharing some fascinating insights in terms of where we are and where we're going with this technology and how it can help us all build relationships with our customers as well. And I wish you all great success with the book.
Cheers. Thank you.
If you're interested in living a more creative life, then I'd love to invite you to join me as I share some of the most successful strategies and techniques that high-performing creatives use. I put them all together in a free downloadable ebook that you can get by going to jamestaylor.me. That's jamestaylor.me to get your free downloadable ebook on creativity.